Okay, well, we're going to get now to the ABCs. and this is probably the most difficult concept to assimilate. And it requires two things, I think, to use this technique effectively. One is people have to be aware of their thinking. Now, this isn't intuitively obvious to everyone because people might respond, well, it's my thinking, I'm aware of it, you know? But in truth, thousands of thoughts go through our head every day. And if we were aware of all of them, we'd be banging into posts and falling off the sidewalk and so forth, because you just can't pay pertinent attention to all of them. And that embodies the concept of mindfulness, because mindfulness basically says you have to eliminate outside distractions in order to really capsulize and be perfectly aware of the thoughts that are going through your head. Now, I became acutely aware of this when I facilitated my first Smart Recovery meeting. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I didn't understand the concepts. I really didn't believe CBT worked, a few other things like that. I was trained in psychodynamic psychiatry. I really didn't know anything about CBT or REBT. I had read Jack Trimpe's book once, maybe 6 months before, when I was beginning to make arrangements to bring him to Boston to get the program started. And our first meeting was in the basement of Memorial Hall at Harvard, and I got a social work student to be the facilitator. And from all the hubbub and publicity and everything I was able to generate, we just had this one stinking meeting. And after about a month, they began fighting with the facilitator. And I spent about 2 hours on the telephone with various people, and finally said, well, we want you to come to the meeting and discuss this. So I went to the meeting, and I didn't realize they really wanted me to facilitate the meeting. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but that's what I ended up doing. At the end of the meeting, I was drenched with sweat. I said, this was terrible. This whole thing is going to blow up. And as I was getting up to leave, they said, well, you're going to come next week, aren't you? So I had to make an existential decision. It turned out to be an existential decision. I said, well, I don't want to see this whole thing go up in smoke. If I have to come back, I'll come back. I was working sort of 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. Barbara, am I exaggerating? Right. So it was not the most prudent move I ever made. But I went home, I read the book, I thought a little about it. I came back the next week. I think I did better at running the meeting. And then the next day I had a meeting at the hospital, an early meeting, and I was a little late leaving the house, and I was rushing to the meeting. And just as I was approaching a crucial intersection, you know, trying to zoom 5 miles ahead of the speed limit, a light went yellow, and then it went red, and I had to put on my brakes. And the thought flashed into my head, God damn it, every time I'm late for a meeting, this damn light turns red. Okay? Now, I'd probably been having that thought for years, and really, I recognized that I had had it. That was my interpretation of this. When does the light turn red? When I'm coming and I'm late for a meeting? It turns red when the damn clock, there used to be a clockwork, now it's a chip, of course, but in those days it was a clockwork. The clock ticked around, it turned red. Had nothing to do with whether I was late or early or where I was going or anything. And I suddenly said, wow, you know, I've been having this thought for years, but I never really was fully aware of it. And certainly I never questioned its rationality or validity or whether it was helpful or unhelpful. And of course it was very unhelpful, because what it did was it froze my thinking at a certain level. And instead of giving me a time and motivation to rationally assess it and say, how can I avoid being late for the meeting next time? So if the light happens to turn red, I'm not going to start getting myself agitated and telling myself stupid things like get up 5 minutes earlier, don't have the second cup of coffee maybe, and so forth and so on. Instead, it became the light and its antagonistic behavior towards me, totally personalizing a mechanical act. And then I suddenly had this flash of recognition about REBT and how it works. and how necessary it is to be aware of your thinking if you want to change it. Now, we all know we're not going to change behavior without changing the way we think. That is the fundament of this whole program, the whole cognitive behavioral operation is to be aware that if you don't change your thinking, you're not going to change your behavior. Now, we're not talking about reflexes. You put your hand on a hot radiator. You don't have to do a lot of thinking about it. Your spine takes care of that. Or maybe your medulla oblongata. But the cortex is involved in all other decisions. Even something simple like going down the line. Do you have salad bars here in the UK? Yeah. Okay. So you're going down the salad bar. You have a certain size plate. You have a certain number of items on the counter. Maybe you can't see them all in the beginning. Do they have anywhere where they weigh what you get? You have a paper box or something and they weigh it at the end? Huh? Yeah, okay, they weigh it. So then you have to worry about, what weighs more, what's value for money and all that. And all at the cortical level, it's all feeding up to your executive center here in the left frontal lobe, the size of the tip of my thumb. And that's where we make our decisions. Since we make a lot of bad decisions, we all know that. Probably most of the people in this room have made a lot of bad decisions, and certainly all of the people in your meetings have made a lot of bad decisions over and over again. And so do business executives sometimes. I read the Financial Times for a few days because it was free at my hotel in London, and it's just all full of stupid things that high-paid executives do, right? The whole paper's full of them. RBS, Barrick Gold, the paper's just full of them. Google, Microsoft, pretty making stupid, crazy, destructive decisions. So even though you get $10 million a year, doesn't mean that this thing is really functioning right. But hopefully you learn from your bad decisions, and that's what we're all about, learning from your bad decisions and changing the way you think about things. Now, this concept that how we feel depends not on what happens or what we do necessarily, but how we interpret it. This is a very fundamental concept. For years I was saying it's 2,600 years old, and then I realized we'd passed the millennium. It was like 2005, and I was still saying 2,600 years, so I changed it to 2,700 years. Because back then, the Greeks knew this concept. And they promulgated, certain philosophers promulgated this concept. Now, it's probably been known to certain people in the species Homo sapiens sapiens. It's really what made us sapient, okay? Is the ability to think through things and learn from experience. That's why we're around, okay? But we don't always apply this capacity wisely. And that's why some of us are not around. That's why we have, what do they call it, the Darwin Award? They award people who die young through stupid activities. They give them the Darwin Award for not passing on their genes. So a lot of human beings have got a deserved Darwin Award, and hopefully they're out of the gene pool. But we're trying to keep people in the gene pool, just have them use their executive center better. So Protagoras, a Greek philosopher 2,700 years ago, put it this way. He said, "It is not things which disturb us, but how we think about things." So this is a very cardinal concept, not intuitively clear, and it's passed on through the Stoic philosophers. There's elements of it certainly in Buddhism. So it's not a unique idea. What's unique about the ABCs is that Albus Ellis designed it to be a very simplistic system. And he named it the ABCs. Nothing is easier than ABC, right? We say that. That's in the folk vernacular. It's as easy. We want a kid to learn to do something. We don't want them to feel like it's too difficult. We say it's as easy as ABC. 1, 2, 3. This is a standard, and that's how we all learn the alphabet, right? We start with ABC. So maybe it's a little bit like smart recovery. I say we got the word because it's very hard to find words to trademark for names for things. We went through three different words before smart recovery, and it was bankrupting us because it cost us $275 for each trademark search. And we had Target, we had a few other things, but other people had used them in the recovery realm. And finally we hit smart, There was only one little group, a divorce recovery group in a little church in California. And we said, we have to take a chance on this. And we put the name in, and now we have a Madrid protocol, trademark all around the world and everything else. But we then backfilled, we went back on it, and we developed the acronym, Self-Management and Recovery Training, okay? So I don't know whether Ellis started with the ABCs, I think he did, and then he tried to get words to fit that pattern. So, activating event. Unfortunately, it causes a bit of a problem. Beliefs. And incidentally, you know, we've developed over the years, we've pretty much incorporated the CBT concepts in with the REBT concepts because they're fundamentally similar, if not exactly the same. Effect. Some people put in a future here. If. You know, how's it going to affect your future? So, activating event is pretty clear. Beliefs maybe isn't the best word to have there. Perceptions, interpretations, thoughts, you know, just what comes into your head. Now, what comes into our head generally reflects our basic beliefs. Like, if our basic belief is that I'm a scumbag, then we tend to blame the activating events on us. If our basic core belief is that people are scum, then this tends to cause us to blame them for the activating events, right? And if our basic belief is that the universe is a black hole, then we tend to blame the world, society, politicians, you know, things like that, for anything that happens that's bad. This reflects a core belief, an attitude. Now, and these core beliefs are very important in the biases that we imply or we impel us when we interpret events. I was going to a meeting once, grand rounds at a hospital for physicians. And, you know, everybody's a little bleary-eyed, 7:30 in the morning, everybody's walking around with a cup of coffee and a donut. You have donuts here? Yeah. No? Too bad. Anyway, horrible, nutritionally horrible food, but hey. So I'm trying to look for some kind of hook, you know, how am I going to wake people up, you know, give them a little jab, and say, whoa, okay. So I was coming down off the turnpike into an intersection, and the light turned red, and I said, light's red, you know. That's the way it is. And there were two cars in front of me with bumper stickers. I found out from the London meeting that you have bumper stickers here. One said, shit happens. The other one said, expect miracles. Okay, think about it. So the people driving those cars have a very fundamental view of the universe and how it operates, and it's going to color everything that happens to them. Their interpretation is going to be colored by that basic core belief. The next day, the very next day, at a different place, I stopped at a red light. In front of me was a car with a bumper sticker that said, life's a bitch, then you die. Okay, so that's another perspective about the world and how it operates and something like that. Very negative perspective. But it's comfortable to some people. If something bad happens, they say, well, hey, what'd you expect? That's the way it works, you know. So, but we all have those kind of, you know, distorting lenses in our brains that push us in one direction or another. And our job in a meeting is to try to tip this up towards a more rational or simply a more helpful perspective. So we've tended to change the definition of what we're disputing from rational or irrational. You know, Albert Ellis believed in vigorous disputation. Earlier on, when we were still rational recovery, we noticed that in certain groups, the women were leaving the groups faster than the men. So in some groups, they had start with 30% women and up with 10% women. Other groups maybe start 40% women and maintain that. So my wife, Barbara, started studying this, spent a lot of time on it, and basically came up with a motivational interviewing concept. There was no such thing at the time, but it basically was that women didn't like this vigorous disputation and didn't like being told that their thinking was irrational. So we gradually and they noticed in a group where it had a woman, she noticed women, when there was a woman facilitator or when there was a man and a woman co-facilitating, the women didn't leave the group. But it wasn't just a question of a woman leading the group, it was a different style. And the style was less confrontational, and they didn't tend to do this vigorous and impactful disputation. So over a period of time, we changed the assessment from irrational to disputing beliefs. And incidentally, I hear people say, well, what do you do in the dispute? We dispute irrational beliefs. You don't dispute irrational beliefs. You dispute all the beliefs that somebody has to find out if they're irrational. You know, not all people's beliefs are irrational. Some are actually rational, reasonable, and we accept that, point that out. If you start off thinking that everything is irrational, then you know, that's where you're going to end up. So now we go more to, is it useful? Is it a useful belief to you? This prism through which everything is judged is you. We're not Puritans. We're not saying this is the rule and you have to adhere to it. No. Are you doing things that are helpful to you, or are you thinking things that are harmful to you because they're going to impel you to do behaviors that are harmful to you? Or are they helpful? Is it a helpful way to think? For instance, to think that everything that happens is other people's faults, that's not a helpful thing, because not everything that happens is other people's fault. Some of them may be your fault. So the failure to see that is a very negative perceptual process. So we may say, is it helpful or harmful? Is it useful or not useful or not? Rather than, is it rational or is it irrational? So now comes the most important single element of this, is consequences, because this is the most frequent one that's misinterpreted. By consequences, Albert Ellis meant, and I've heard this from his lips, so that's what it is. He was very clear, this is a feeling, it's an emotion. The emotion is consequent to the beliefs about an activating event. It is not what happened to you, like I got an urge and I got drunk. That is not a consequence in this context, okay? So this is not necessarily intuitive, but that's how he constructed this. And he had to have a C word that indicated the derivation of the emotional distress. Doesn't have to be emotional distress, it could be elation, you know. I found out I passed my final exam. My belief, I worked hard, I studied hard, and I passed it. Good. Be happy, okay? But it's an emotion, and the emotion can, if it's a constructive emotion and it's not too severe or intense, it can lead to a good and productive behavior. If the emotion that is consequent is intense, maybe it's intense exhilaration, may lead you to do something stupid, you know? We had a graduation party, some guy in Boston, and he disappeared. He graduated Harvard Law School, he disappeared. Went out, got drunk, fell off a pier, Boston Harbor, and that was it. So, you know, wonderful. He had a wonderful, exhilarating experience. He interpreted it properly. It was a great accomplishment. Goodbye. So so it's this level of behavior. So we see that let's say this is even keel over here, all right? This is an equitable kind of level of emotion. And let's say something happens and goes on this side, the anger side of the spectrum, okay? So let's say it's mild, we say we're annoyed, okay? And then if we get ourselves a little more disturbed, we're irritated. And then a little worse, maybe we're furious. And then if we really get ourselves into a funk, we're enraged. And maybe up here we're livid. You know, our face is red, our veins are engorged, standing out and whatever. So you can see that at each different level of this, there's more and more hormones pouring around in our brain, and our thinking process becomes distorted. And that's what's behind this all, is that your ability to think rationally is compromised according to the intensity of your emotional state. So on the other end of the spectrum, let's say something, makes you blue or sad or then depressed, and then let's say the lowest level, major depression, and then finally suicidal or self-injurious. Maybe self-injurious comes first, and then finally suicidal. So, you know, people serious attempt at suicide. And then maybe they get over their depression, they say, what the hell was I thinking? I have so much to live for, and I was trying to kill myself. And that's really demonstrates the ultimate distortion of thinking that we can go through when our hormonal milieu is sufficiently distorted. You know, we've depleted all our dopamine and adrenaline and whatever. So this is what we want to eliminate. We don't want to have a Buddhist effect, like nothing's going to affect us. You know, we're just completely on an even keel, and slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, all of these things just whacking away at us. And we say, hey, not to worry. Okay, you have that expression here? That's an Australian expression. I don't know whether you have it here. Not to worry. Anyway, we would say, don't worry. What do you say?
Stay calm and carry on.
Stay calm and carry on. There you are. Okay. So that's the idea. And that's the idea of this. But the carry on is rational thinking, better thinking, more constructive thinking. You'll be able to do it. Now, clearly, when you get up into this range, in this range, you start doing self-destructive and other destructive things. Other destructive things always end up turning back on you in some way, so they're inherently self-destructive, you know. You do things to people, they do things to you. You do things to institutions, they do things to you. You do things to the legal system, they do things to you. So it reflects back. Now, so we would like to see people stay in this range, and you probably do know people who do stay in that range. They don't get jarred free. And this is one of the things that Maslow noticed, and these are normal people, okay? Only 10% of the population. I read his book on normality, and when I finished the book, I put it down, I said, well, I know two normal people. My professor in the Brandeis Biochemistry Lab, and the waitress at the Waltham Town Hall Grill. Okay, you know, it's an identifiable kind of syndrome. In my practice of medicine for 30 years, I met some of these people, and it was interesting. When I first met them, I thought they were abnormal, okay? Because my judgment schema was what the average response was. Now, these people are unusual. You know, go in and tell somebody, well, the biopsy came back and it's cancer. It's demonstrated to be a cancer. And these people might respond this way. Well, what do we do now, doctor? What's next? And then I'd say, well, I just want to make sure that you heard that this is cancer and you understand. He said, I know what cancer is. You know, where do we go from here? So, you know, I'd leave the room and I'd say, whew, I don't know, you know, this is gonna break out some other way, you know, something like that. But it didn't. Some of these people I knew for 20, 30 years, and this is the way they responded. They knew they could do nothing about the past but to undo reality, and they only want to know where do you go from here? Okay, so this is a characteristic of normal people. I had a good friend, very good friend. She was a professor emerita from CCNY, and she found out she had a brain tumor. First it looked like it was some kind of a small stroke or something, and finally it turned out to be an incurable brain tumor. And I said, well, you know, what do you think about this? So she wasn't my patient. I said, what do you think about it? She said, well, I got to, I edit a journal. I got to get that turned over to somebody, and I've been very fortunate. I've invested in real estate. I've been very successful. I want to get a foundation going about end-of-life issues and so forth and so on. That's how she went down the line. And after she died, I talked to her daughter and to her partner, and I said, did you ever hear her say anything like, why? She was only 67 and, you know, brilliant woman, very dynamic woman. And I said, did you ever hear her say anything like, why did this have to happen to me? Or I wish this happened. They said, no. So that's how some people, you know, handle things. Not everyone, most of us don't do it that way, but this is how some people do it. And this is equanimity. I don't think she was a meditator or anything like that, or ever knew anything about REBT. This is just the way she was, you know. And it's a goal hopefully we could all achieve, because we can't do anything about the things we can't do anything about, you know. Other people take different tangents, go to a faith healer. We had one person from Maine said, we want a helicopter to take her back to the Mass General Hospital in Boston. I said, well, where are you? They said, we're in Maine. I said, what are you doing in Maine with her? Oh, there was a healer up here. We came up here to see. That's how some people respond. And other people respond in a, you know, more rational manner. So this is a critical thing to remember. We're talking about emotions. And it's pretty simple, folks. There it is, the range of human emotion. Bad means anxious, okay? I used to say anxious, sad, mad, glad, and I said, hey, I want to rhyme. So bad means anxious, sad, depressed, mad. In the US, mad is not used anymore in its original Shakespearean sense to be insane. Mad means angry. I said that in Australia. They said, no, mad still means insane here. So, however, understand this means angry in the anger spectrum, not in the sanity spectrum, okay? And that's what it is. So, and it's a question of degrees. Do it 0 to 9, you know? How angry were you? Now, interestingly, people present in something in a check-in. They say, well, I had an argument with my wife and she said this and that. Okay. And maybe we come back to them now to do an ABC. And we'll say, well, you know, how angry were you? Well, here's the spectrum here. And they say, well, maybe just angry. Now, they start talking about it and telling us about the details and what they thought. And by the end, they're saying, well, maybe I was furious, you know. And by the end, they're saying, well, maybe I was enraged. So people don't like to say I was enraged, but they'll work their way into it and they'll gradually understand. And that's why their thinking was distorted, because they got to the enraged level. If the angry level, probably they could have retained their senses about them and had different interpretation of things. Now often they forget what they were thinking in many ways. I did this at a introduction. I said, well, has anybody had an upsetting event in the last couple of weeks that they might like to, you know, do this ABC exercise on, so forth, as a demonstration? So a woman put her hand up. And what had happened was she was drunk, and her husband called the police And the police came, and they ended up taking her away. I don't know what exactly happened, but something happened so that he called the police. And when I got to the beliefs part, I said, well, what were you thinking that time? She says, I was thinking they're going to take my child away from me. I said, okay, we put that down. And I said, well, anything else? She said, no. I said, that's all you were thinking? She said, yeah. I was thinking that, and I was thinking, the only thing that can help me in this situation is a drink. Okay? And she was drunk already. That's why the police were called. But by the time we were through talking about this, we had to stop. There were 7. Turned out there were 7 distinct thoughts that she had had. Just about everyone off the beam, off rational. And you know, she just blotted it all out. But as we talked about it, she said, well, and I said, well, did you think anything about your behavior? And she said, oh yeah. She was thinking, I'm a scumbag, I'll never get over this, I've destroyed my life, and so forth and so on, and thoughts like this. And I knew to work back from that, because not only did she first said she was depressed. So depression usually relates to this category of irrational thinking or unhelpful thinking, too, self. One is people. People must do what I want. And the self-talk that leads to irrational thinking is usually, I should be perfect, I should be a perfect wife, a perfect mother, a perfect student, and everything I should do right, and if I can't, I'm no good, I'm a bummer, I'm a failure, and so forth and so on. And Freud used to say depression is anger at yourself, and that's a pretty good expression. Then the third category runs into the world, how the world should be different, must be different, and so forth and so on. And so when I saw that depression was an issue, I said, well, what about yourself? And then she brought up all these self-injurious thoughts that she had, or self-incompetence thoughts. And then her husband, and I said, well, you're angry? She said, yes, my goddamn husband called the police. He didn't have to call the police. And then it turned out, I forget what it was, but he was afraid she was going to injure the child or something or other. And then I said, you know, now, and she says, it's not fair, they're going to take my baby away, et cetera, and they're not going to give it back, and I'm really a good mother, and so forth. And then I said, well, now that you've had 2 weeks of perspective on this, what do you think? Was it a good thing or a bad thing that that your husband called the police? She said, a good thing. Okay? So this shows you the distortion, because she realized that through this, oh yeah, and that day I had heard her talking with people and said she got a job. Okay, so she was out of work. So now it's 2 weeks later, she's in a program. I said, well, what do you think of the program? She said, I love the program. Okay, so she's a new person. She got a whole new perspective of life and everything, all because her husband called the police. So this is what we do. I was in a prison, running a prison group. I run almost 800 prison groups. And you should know we have a special program of smart recovery, correctional program. National Institute of Drug Abuse paid $1 million to have this program developed. It was developed by a private concern for us with a license from Smart Recovery. This is a fantastic program. We call it Inside Out in the United States. And Richard has revised it, anglicized the spelling, modernized it, and so forth, because it is about 13, 14 years or 15 years old. So it's available for any of you who work in prisons and so forth. Yeah, okay.
Is it online?
No. This is copyrighted, so it has to be purchased or given by us because it's copyrighted. So somebody came in my prison group and they said, well, something terrible happened to me, but it turned out to be the best thing ever happened to me. I said, well, what? You know, he did this during the check-in, new man. So it turned out that he had been speeding, he was riding with his girlfriend, and he had marijuana in the glove compartment and cocaine in the trunk. And the cop flagged him down, a policeman flagged him down for, or a PC, right? You call him PC? PC flagged him down. And I read the paper, there was some articles, a PC. I said, what the hell is a PC? And I finally figured it out. So, from my Gilbert and Sullivan experience. So flagged him down, came over, took his license, and the guy said, this is it. My goose is cooked. He had marijuana in the glove compartment, had a lot of cocaine in the trunk, enough to cause a 15-year mandatory sentence. Okay? It's, in the U.S., it's by amount, mandatory sentence. So he's saying, that's it, my goose is cooked. Just at that moment, some other driver goes through a red light, goes through the red light. And the policeman blows his whistle and flags this guy down, runs over there, starts screaming at him and everything. And this guy said, meanwhile, the girl takes the marijuana out, puts it in her shirt. About 5-10 minutes later, the policeman comes back. He's all burned out over yelling at this guy, went right through the red light and said, okay, here's your license. Get the hell out of here. He said, don't do that again. And let him drive off. And he said, he happened to be in prison, not for that, but for a previous episode. And so this would have been a second conviction. And so no leniency was going to come out of anything. And he said, that was it. I said, no more drugs, never going to sell them, and so forth. And he apparently never had. He said, that's it. So then I went around to the group and I said, well, I want you all to think back something in your life that at the time it happened, you said, this is a catastrophe. This is terrible. This is the worst thing ever happened to anybody. I can't stand this, and so forth. And that when you thought back later on it, with the passage of time, you said, you know something? It was actually good that this happened. It turned out to be beneficial. I was thinking, well, I heard him talking about something in my own life that I had interpreted as being catastrophic. And in the long run, looking back, I said, you know something? Lucky that happened because it changed the way I was going to do things or so forth. Every single person in the room put their hand up. Everyone in there had thought of something that at the time it happened was catastrophic, turned out to be beneficial. Since that time, I thought of 4 things in my life that turned out that way. 4. And at dinner last night, we were talking about it, and I thought of a 5th one. So when you realize that we've probably all done this once or twice or more times, it shows you how the way we felt at a given situation distorted our thinking to make us think that this was terrible. Not even that it was neutral, and then maybe it would work out, but that it was bad, unequivocally bad, and then later. So what we're trying to do with this methodology is move that up. Move that up to the present and use our brains to figure out how it might open up other options, how to look forward in 2 years. How is this, is this really the last good girlfriend you're ever going to have? Or maybe somebody else will come on, and so forth and so on. A lot of things like that. So that's what we're trying to do, bring a more rational perspective up to the present and use the group to bounce things off and to get a better perspective on things. And that's what we do in the dispute. Now, there are a few tricks in this, a few cognitive tricks, because often people say things that are just declarative sentences, like my husband, under the beliefs, they'll say, my husband screamed at me. Okay. So just as one thing, okay, we list the beliefs down, 2, 3, 4, and the consequence was I got very angry. So say how much? Let's say 5 on a 0 to 9 scale. Then when we get down to the dispute, so even at this point when she says this, and she says 5, so this statement, my husband screamed at me, it's just an objective description of what happened, right? Assuming that he didn't say it in a normal voice, assuming he raised his voice, and that it was something pejorative. Also, this doesn't refer to what he actually said, which might be pertinent and germane. So he said, my husband screamed at me. So that's an objective. Let's accept it. It's as she says it. He screamed at her. He raised his voice. She could have been frightened. She could have been angry. She could have been depressed about that, right? But this doesn't lend to a clear conclusion of anything like that. So what she is doing is leaving things out. Okay, this is an elision, a leaving out of something. So what I like to do, because someone could relate this as, my husband screamed at me. Or they could say, my husband screamed at me. Or my husband screamed at me. Okay, so it implies different kind of perceptual things. So I like to use what I call the comma technique. Put a comma in there and finish the sentence. Because if that made you angry, you added something onto that. What did she add on to that? I shouldn't have to put up with that. Or he shouldn't have done that. Or that's no way to behave. He's got no right to do that. I didn't scream at him, so he shouldn't have, and so forth and so on. Okay? Now, she didn't say any of that, but it's in there, folks. If she's angry, it's in there. Okay? So if you just leave it like this, it's kind of bland. You're not going anywhere with it. On the other hand, if she admits that, well, what he said was that I'm a slut or something. I mean, there has to be more to it than this, or it's very difficult to work with it. So there's usually, as you know, shoulds, oughts, and musts in there of some kind or other. And it's important to bring them to the fore. And then as she talks about it, you may find out this goes up to 7, and then to 9. And then there's also selective forgetting. So we were discussing this, and in a prison group, a man was in there for shooting someone in a bar. And he had a 2-year-old son he was very fond of. Now he had a 5-year sentence. Fortunately, the man didn't die. So it was just assault with a deadly weapon or something, maybe illegal, who knows. Anyway, it wasn't manslaughter. So, sorry. So he said, well, you're not wrong. You're wrong about this, he said, because I shot him and I wasn't thinking irrationally. So here's the story he told. In a bar, got into an argument with a guy who insulted him in some way, or he perceived it as an insult. And they got shouting at each other. But the guy was like 6'2". I don't know how many meters that is, 2 meters roughly, 2 meters, and big husky guy with big shoulders. So he wasn't going to fight him. He was about 5'8". So he left the bar and he walked home to get his gun. And it's a 10-minute walk. And he said all the way he was walking along saying, this is crazy, this is stupid, you're going to be sorry for doing this, don't do it, bad idea, you'll end up in jail, your son won't have a father. And he's walking along, gets home, takes his gun, takes it out, puts a clip in, puts it in his pocket, turns around, comes back, walking to the bar, all the way saying, you're stupid, don't do it, ridiculous, you're going to get into trouble, and then walks into the bar and shoots the guy. And he's saying, see that? I was only thinking rational thoughts, but I did it anyway. So how would you respond to that? Guy's completely blown up this whole theory.
There must have been irrational thoughts that he was having at the same time that he wasn't really...
Notice, he's completely exonerated himself now, right? He's conveniently forgot the other things that he was thinking, like...
I'll teach him.
I'll show him, the son of a bitch. He can't talk to me this way. Just because he thinks there's a big way, I'm going to cut him down to size. But he's completely thought that, because now his son from 2 to 7 has no father. And not my fault. It was my rational thinking was good, and I did it anyway. So this happens. People just forget. So part of our job is to kind of bring them all back to reality and understand that in this case, he must have been thinking irrational thoughts. There had to be irrational thoughts there, and there were. We know there were. We know that we know exactly the kind of thoughts that he must have had, and he finally admitted, yeah, I guess I was thinking those kind of thoughts. So we can't necessarily you have to listen for the cues and the clues and sometimes project some things that might happen depending on the kinds and the degrees of emotional response that people have. So if they say they were depressed, you have to say, well, you're thinking that, you might in some way be deficient in how you respond to this and so forth. So this woman with the episode with the children, she said, oh yeah, I was thinking I'm a terrible mother and look what I've done and so forth and so on, which is only normal and natural. But she didn't recall these things spontaneously. So sometimes you have to just, not tell people what they think, but just ask them, were there any thoughts in this sort of direction, this sort of category, anything like that. And often it'll come gushing out. Now, we go down, we say, okay, 1. We still use Ellis's construction, either rational belief or irrational belief. We could say helpful belief or unhelpful belief. Now we get down to effect. So here's the amazing thing now. People may go through this and, none of their problems have been resolved. I mean, they're still there. And it's very important when somebody comes in, often somebody comes in to check in, they say like 9 things are going wrong with their life. They lost their job, and they're this, and their kid's doing that, and the mother-in-law, and then this, and then the boss, and, and I mean, you just can't, even in an individual psychotherapy session, you can't deal with that kind of diffuse dysfunction. Never mind at a group meeting with 10, 15 people there. So the crucial thing, I've learned this by bad experience, is to get them to hone down on one single activating event. And it's very difficult because they want to keep branching out to all the terrible things. Get them on that and keep them on that route. Now, I had one guy didn't want to do that. He wanted to keep talking about all, and I thought at one point he got up, and I said, all right, he's either going to attack me. He got up and he was pacing around. I thought he's either going to attack me or walk out. And he walked back a few times. Finally, he sat down. I said, no, we got to stay on this one and keep at it and keep at it and keep at it. And finally, he visibly began to calm down and calm down. And finally, we got down to effect. And I said, well, how do you feel about this? He said, well, I'm a lot more optimistic about it now. Okay, so what happens here is, but even if we go through, because we did, by calming him down about it and making him focus, he eventually brought out some other potential options that he hadn't mentioned that were open to him. But in this diffusion, in this, anger and fear and everything that he had about a coming operation that he had to have or something, and he had nowhere to live, and then find out that there really were options, but he wasn't, because of his biases, he wasn't wanting to really consider them. He sort of wanted to make it into a chaotic, threatening situation rather than accepting some, not perfect, but reasonable possible resolutions. When we get down to the effect, he said, well, I'm feeling more optimistic about it. So this is what you have to do if you want to use this method. You can't use it on 6 different problems at a time. It only can work with one activating event, and you have to narrow it down. Now, sometimes activating event is depression or anxiety or something, and you can put this up and then try to go through this and find out what it is, the beliefs that are causing that.